I mean, in the church, we're dealing with the reality that prior to COVID, 95% of our congregation was in person, and now about 30% on a given Sunday or more, 35% is online. So that changes, and I think that's probably true for a lot of churches and probably a lot of different groups as well, besides churches, that there are more people that are online. COVID really accelerated that trend.
Welcome to Season 13 of the More Than Sunday podcast. I'm Rohini Drake, your host, and in this season, which we're calling What the Tech, we're exploring the intersection of faith and technology and reflecting on how we might retain our humanity in an increasingly digital world. Now, to retain some of my humanity, I have my notes so I can make sure to get this next part right. This season features conversations with pastors and faith leaders who are part of the Phygital Preaching Fellowship, which is an initiative of the Texas Methodist Foundation and Wesleyan Impact Partners that has been made possible through a grant from the Lilly Endowment. I've had the privilege of being part of this group for the last 2 years, and these interviews were recorded when we were gathered together in Chicago last March. We're capturing real, thoughtful reflections from leaders who are navigating ministry in hybrid and an evolving faith landscape. In each episode, we're also joined by Pastors Clayton and Allison, who help us navigate some of these conversations and add their own wisdom and give us their thoughts through a lens of faith. Now, in this first episode, we explore how people are using online spaces to ask questions and find connection. And we'll hear from Reverend Jonah Overton, who's the lead pastor and planter of Zao Church, which is a thriving online congregation that uses Discord to gather. Now, if you don't know what Discord is, that's something that you could look up and Google, because I had to do that too. I didn't know what Discord was before I joined this group years ago. And in this first interview, I asked the Reverend Rachel Gilmore, who's an elder in the United Methodist Church, and is also the co-author of Followers Under 40, and The Journey Away from Church for Millennials, Gen Z, and Gen Alpha. I asked her about what she's seen people bringing into the online spaces right now.
I mean, a lot of it depends on the context, and the digital platform where you're encountering people. But I would say in general, common themes I'm seeing are folks want a sense of belonging. They don't want to feel alone. They want a sense of shared resourcing. So if they're feeling anxious or they're struggling with finances or purpose, they want to know that there's someone or something out there that can help them sort it out or understand potential pathways forward. I think they're also wanting a way to feel more deeply when they're happy, when they're sad, to have a place to process that or not feel so alone with whatever it is their lived experience might be.
So from what Rachel said, it sounds like a lot of people are seeking kind of these spaces for whether it's comfort or processing emotions in online spaces where traditionally it's been that sort of support is found in in-person spaces. So I'm wondering if you've seen in your ministry this kind of shift from in-person to sometimes now online, and how do we meet that need, or how do we speak into those spaces?
Yeah, so I'm a part of several different groups on social media that have affinities that we share. So whether it's we live in the same part of Dallas, or I'm part of a mom's group, and I have seen a lot of folks who are posting, where do I find community where I live? Where do I find connection where I live? And those have become these, as she said, spaces of shared resources where people are offering up. Sometimes it's there's a great outdoor playground where you can take your kids, and we meet there on Mondays at 10 a.m., that kind of thing. But there's also just this sense of, we hear what you're looking for, and we totally get what that feels like. We look for the same thing, and you're not alone. And so I think it's a really great place where people can ask questions where maybe they didn't know where to go before. It's kind of the new phone book where you used to have this physical phone book with all these different community resources that would tell you where to go. And now you're connecting with real people instead of just looking at pages, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think that the phone book image is a good way to think about it because information is right at your fingertips. You used to make a phone call and get put on hold and, make 5 calls before you get the right person. And now you have these instant communities where you can get that kind of information, whether it's right or not. And that's the we can talk about that later. That's the danger. But yeah, that sense that you're not alone and there are resources and you can connect. I think that's a really positive thing about having all this information at your fingertips.
So almost an additive to, we just didn't have these spaces before because we didn't have the technology built to support it. And so, when people need something, they have more resources than just the in-person space. They can go to the online space, which I think is fantastic. And we listen to moms groups all day long.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I mean, in the church, we're dealing with the reality that prior to COVID, 95% of our congregation was in person, and now about 30% on a given Sunday or more, 35% is online. So that changes, and I think that's probably true for a lot of churches and probably a lot of different groups as well, besides churches, that there are more people that are online. COVID really accelerated that trend.
Well, another question that I had kind of in the context of this series of What the Tech was, we're a church and we have a mission and we have values that we share and a theology that we name when you come in person. But I was wondering, and I was asking my peers, where have you seen kind of theology and technology intersect? And so this is Reverend Jonah Overton, who shared some of their experience.
So one of the core kind of concepts of the theology as taught by Jesus is the concept of the neighbor and what it means to draw near to someone. When Jesus preached about the neighbor, preached about the Good Samaritan, he made particular word choices, how to frame what neighborliness was. And he could have chosen something that would be more tied to ethnic identity or tribal identity. And instead, he chose something that was about physical proximity, and then told a story of somebody crossing the road to come near to someone using the same, like a related verb. So we're called to be neighbors to someone, and the language in which Jesus makes that invitation is about physical or geographic proximity, to draw near to someone. There are ways in which virtual technology makes distances feel greater. We're further away from one another. We're maybe meeting from our own rooms or locations or different cities, different time zones. But there's another way in which virtual space collapses geography and allows us to draw near to anyone who is willing and able to draw near to us at the same time and with the same intention. And so I think the theological conversations about what it means to be a neighbor and how we can draw near to one another have incredible implications for engaging in virtual space to be loving and to love God and to love our neighbor as ourself.
So I really like the phrase or the idea that the virtual spaces collapse geography, and we're able to be near to people. I just love the visual of that because it's been named that the U.S. is in this epidemic of loneliness. And so how have you seen virtual spaces either help and heal or maybe even hurt people who are experiencing loneliness?
I think we've had tools at our disposal through most of human history, and those tools can be used to help or to harm. And I think technology is the same. It's just another tool that we can use. And if we are paying attention and if we're being intentional, it can really help. So I have some personal experience with geography being collapsed, my husband and I were long distance until 3 months before we got married. And we very intentionally, when he lived halfway across the country, we would have a standing time where we would get on Skype, not Zoom, because this was a long time ago. And we would both dress up and we would get the same kind of meal. So if he got Tex-Mex, I would get Tex-Mex, or if I wanted Italian, he would get Italian. And we would sit down and share a meal together over technology, even though we were literally not even in the same time zone. And we made some really intentional choices so that the technology was a tool at our disposal that helped to create that shared space. And I think if we can be really intentional about the way we use it, it can be really helpful. But if we're not being thoughtful, if we're treating it more as like a place for consumption rather than engagement, that's where we can get into some muddier waters.
Yeah, more than 30 years ago, Robert Putnam wrote a book called Bowling Alone, talking about this trend in our national life together of people not joining institutions. Bowling leagues were going down. Rotary clubs, people were not joining. Churches, people were not joining. The traditional community gathering spaces were disappearing. And I think that trend has continued. COVID certainly brought greater isolation to people. The beauty that can be possible through technology is that neighborhoods can be formed and neighbors can grow from wherever they are. And the whole idea of a neighborhood can move to online in a way that very healthy communities are formed, and people are not bowling alone. They're not eating alone. They're with a group of people, and we were wired. The Bible tells us we're wired for community. That's the way God intended us to live, and that's when life is best. And so this isolation is not good for our souls. And to have the technology to be able to connect with people wherever they are can be something very beautiful.
And I know just from our experience with our online congregation, we got a text just today from one of our congregants, and in his text, he just named how the online congregation, not us as staff, but the people in the chat and the people that he's never met or know their voice or seen their face, but they are his support and his comfort through hard times. And to know that neighborhood is being built in those spaces feels great. So when I see people in person here, and I can imagine the people that I know from online just by their name, that we're all part of this greater neighborhood. And to me, it's a very hopeful thing to say that we're bigger and farther away, but also in some ways still closer together.
So I met a brother and sister after worship, and one lives in Missouri and one lives in El Paso. And this has been something that has blessed their relationship as siblings, that they worship with us on Sunday mornings and then talk about the service. And they happened to be in town to here and came up and said, "We wanted to meet our pastor. We know you, but you don't know us." And but what a neat thing. Here's siblings who live hundreds of miles apart, who are finding a connection to a church community and being able to find a connection in their own relationship through the church.
And I think that's the thing about engaging versus consuming, that the beauty of our online worship community is how many of them engage. That there are folks who are more involved in our online community than some folks who come into our physical space, because they come in, maybe they don't greet anyone, they sit in the back pew, and as much as we try to say hello and acknowledge people whenever they come into our physical space, it's always up to the folks who are coming in as to how much they're going to engage. And so they can float in and float out, and we totally embrace if you want to be anonymous for a while. But the online space is somewhere where we're seeing so many people who are actively participating. And that's really the work of the church, is when the body itself, the body of believers, is engaging with one another to do the work of God.
It's a beautiful thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, in our next episode, next week, is going to be about one of those really tough questions about technology. And online spaces, and it's how do we know what's true? So thank you so much for this conversation. I'm looking forward to next week's. Thanks again for joining us for this episode. If you want to learn more about the guests that we had on this episode, you can visit fumcr.com/morethansunday. There you can also find any other episodes you may have missed. Thanks again for joining us. I hope you have a wonderful week.